The principles of justice, harmony, balance, order, and reciprocity. It is our duty to deliver authentic and unapologetic messages to the world, from politics to economics, education, spiritual roots. This is the Morning of Truth.
Welcome to a new episode of the Morning of Truth. I'm your host, Shabaka Mu Ausar.
And I am your host, Ptah. Today's episode, this is our third episode of this season, and it's called The Purge. Essentially, we have a lot of things we have to get rid of. It's a lot of things we have to abandon. First, we have to shed, then abandon. And that's exactly what The Purge is all about. It's not just the purge that you would see in the movies. What we're talking about is what we're seeing. We are essentially seeing the energy of a purge occurring. But more importantly, we need to purge a lot of stuff that's inside of us, out of us. So that's essentially what this whole episode is about.
That's right. We got another powerful show about how Africans can psychologically prepare for the purge in America.
That's right. So we're going to get to it, man. So the first segment, we're talking about what we're experiencing now, which is the fall of white malignancy. And we're seeing it in the form of these statues being taken down. And we see some George Washington statues got taken down. I think a Thomas Jefferson statue. Robert E. Lee.
Columbus got his head removed.
Right. We're seeing some real serious things occurring. And to be honest, the majority of the folks that are taking these statues down are white folks.
Yeah, white people have been electrified. They've been like robots, and they've been out here being very disruptive. Their faces are becoming the face of the protests. If you look at pictures and video of the protests around the world, there's a lot of Europeans' faces inside these protests.
Yes, it is.
And they feel empowered, and rightfully so. This is something your ancestors created. So I think the powers that be never really anticipated the movement going this way.
Right. And it's a responsibility for white folks to be doing this to begin with, because their folks are the ones that committed the heinous acts against our ancestors.
Right.
So let's look at it through a very important lens of cleansing. Right? You have to right the wrongs of your folks. If you don't, like I said before, there's a curse that you're going to receive along with the privileges that you inherited. If you're doing some things that's going to push out the negativity, because if you're in the right state of mind, do you want your legacy to be attached to some wicked, vile, disgusting, inhumane legacy?
Right.
I doubt it.
You don't. And guess what? There's no way around it, folks. You have to come clean, because as we said in the last episode, it's not going to be some African army that's going to destroy you. It's going to be nature.
Right.
It's going to be self-destruction, because this is what the energy calls for during the cleanse. The earth is also cleansing.
Mm-hmm.
And when you come to these fires and water and wind, those are elements that we are all familiar with, and how Mother Nature is taking its revenge.
Right. And we have to be very diligent and careful and cautious of what's occurring too, because we've seen in the past how white folks hijack movements for their own personal agendas. Self-preservation. Also, a lot of these flags that are being put up now, I'd be seeing Black Lives Matter flags right alongside rainbow flags.
Yes.
Posted all over the place. Like they're infusing the movements, essentially. Right? And I can clearly see how they could be able to do that, because you're using black trans, black LGBT folks to infuse that, because essentially LGBT is a white movement. And when black folks sign on to that, you can immediately take over the whole voice. And that's what you're seeing now. Like, I saw a video the other day of white folks saying Black Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter, while raising a Black Lives Matter flag along with the LGBT flag at the very same time. Like, you know how you raise the American flag somewhere and you're saluting it? They're doing the same thing with these flags. And yeah, we can see what's happening.
Yeah, we have to be careful. I just saw Nick Cannon's show, Cannon's class, and the brother Tariq was on the show, and he was talking about the fact that the LGBTQA is a white racist organization.
Yes, it is.
And black folks, and you also mentioned it, and we already know, but we have to reiterate that because folks think that there's something black about that movement. There's nothing black about that movement. It's like integration. We want you integrate it in something that you have no control over, and you don't control the money that flows to the organization. So you're trying to be a part of something that you wasn't included on.
Right.
And the feminist movement as well.
Exactly.
Like, we have to be careful of these systems that we try to integrate in and think it's of our own. But when it comes down to it, you're going to see what end of the pole that you're on.
Right.
Because you're black, you're African.
Right.
And they have not forgotten that and will never forget that.
Exactly. So let's think about the terminologies that they're using, because we're talking about the fall of white malignancy, right? And you got Black Lives Matter at the forefront of this movement, when in actuality it turned into a white movement, essentially. If you was to listen to the language that they're using, it's a deficit model that they're pushing. They're saying, I can't breathe. Hands up, don't shoot. You know what I mean?
Right.
These are pleads. These are like, I'm begging you to not kill me. You know, I can't breathe. That does not sound like the rhetoric of someone that's like, listen, by any means necessary, like the rhetoric that was coming from a Malcolm X back in the 60s.
Right.
Back in the 50s.
Very docile language.
Very docile.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, they're using terminologies that Martin Luther King used, in a sense, just to pacify or to keep us from being able to uprise in a position of strength, position of leadership, because we're still essentially begging and asking and pleading for folks not to kill us or to give us a rightful place in a society that truly don't belong to the people that's controlling it.
Right, like this government, this system, these Europeans are very selfish, and when they wrote these bylaws, these constitutions, these amendments, they never had us in mind. It was always from the context of white malignancy. You know what I'm saying? It never was from the standpoint of power for all or power to the people. It was for a few that wrote these laws that didn't apply to us. And we're trying to make something apply that was never intended to be applied to you in the first place.
Right.
You know what I mean? It wasn't. But I want to digress and go back to the statues, because that's also important, because that image, those images of the toppling of these racist white men is a powerful image for us to see, for our babies to see when they ask you questions. Oh, why are they tearing these statues down? Because they need to go.
Right.
Now, whether Europeans are really all in for us or not, at least we do have that momentum. So it's up to us, not white people, to continue to destroy these white racist statues and psychological binds, which we're gonna go into further in the show, my brother.
Exactly, man. And the thing about it too, I want to mention, to veggie back on what you're talking about, is when you're taking down these racist statues, you are essentially tearing down these white malignant shrines of white folks that's been enshrined and pushed
and ritualized,
and basically immortalized, you know, because people are continuing to celebrate the legacy of white supremacy by looking at those statues, and those statues there's energy in those statues when you are pouring into them. And it's the same thing I was saying before when I was having a conversation with you about the city we actually live in. So every time we say Rochester, we are essentially invoking the spirit of Nathaniel Rochester. Right. Which is a racist, white, malignant person that owned slaves during the time frame that he was alive. And let's also look at the streets that we drive down.
all the time.
Jefferson Avenue. Or we go into a school called Benjamin Franklin High School. We're essential Thomas Edison High School. Like, look at all
Benjamin Franklin.
They are enshrined
George Washington
everywhere. So not only should we be taking down these statues, we should be renaming all of these institutions and taking these white racist names off of them, because we wonder why we got dark clouds over our cities. We have them because we continue to invoke the evil, wicked spirit of these folks that lived long ago. And they continue to be alive because we're constantly saying their names over and over again. It's just like libation. You're pouring libation and you're calling out your ancestors and so on and so forth. And this is why they keep their power. So we have to take the power away from them by taking the names away, taking the statues away, which are also enshrined in everything that we do.
Right. And we got the so-called president of the United States, Donald Orange-Faced Trump. He has created and pushed for legal action to be taken against folks who are trying to dethrone and deface and take down these racist statues. As a matter of fact, this weekend, 4 men were arrested for attempting to take down the so-called racist president Andrew Jackson's statue in Lafayette Square Park near the White House. So already, I'm not sure if these folks are white or not, but I'm assuming they are. But 4 people got arrested, and they can face up to 10 years in prison for doing such.
Because of the executive order he signed. Now, for those that don't know the history of Andrew Jackson, let me break it down to you. Do you know what the Trail of Tears was about? It was all about the slaughtering, the removal of folks from a particular area in Florida, removing the Seminoles and all those folks right there, pushing them out and moving them westward in Oklahoma and so on and so forth, because there was a war going on during this time frame. And Andrew Jackson, he was trying to essentially exterminate and also trying to evict these folks out of a certain part that they were inhabiting in Florida. And they was practicing guerrilla warfare on the Union soldiers at the time. You know, the folks that was coming in, they was trying to take over the area, and they was not having it. So, you know, you had the Seminoles, you also had the Cherokee. You had like 5 different groups of natives that was living in a certain area, and he essentially pushed them out. And it was called the Trail of Tears because they had to walk from where they were at westward. And a lot of those folks died from disease, from exhaustion. I'm talking about mothers that were pregnant, children, just a slaughtering of folks. And this was under Andrew Jackson's order. So this was a savage president.
That's on our money.
That's on our money, the $20 bill.
So all you $20 bill holders, they're trying to replace that with Harriet. Hold on the conversation. But they have Andrew Jackson. So I guess that they know the importance of that statue in that park because it's so close proximity to the White House. He could not tolerate that coming down.
Right.
So he's saying, I don't care what color you are. If you're white, we're going to persecute you. We're going to put you in jail to make an example. But for those folks who are there in D.C., don't let him deter you.
Right. And also for folks, don't allow these celebrities to distract you either. I actually commend folks like Kyrie Irving and Dwight Howard for stepping up and saying, like, listen, if we play basketball now, it's going to be a distraction for the movement. I would prefer a win of social activism and racial justice than a win, a chip, essentially.
Right.
Winning a championship. Why would I want to? I'd rather win the championship of liberation, of sovereignty, African sovereignty, than winning a sports championship, because that's going to essentially serve as a distraction for what's happening right now. We have enough momentum. Let's not slow it down.
Right. And we need other professional athletes to jump on board. Stop the cooning, man.
Right.
Don't be $1 million slave. Don't be $1 million slave under a contract when you already got money. It's going to be okay. Stand up, be a man, be a woman, and say, no, we're not going to tolerate it, because guess what? The whole American system, their whole identity is being funneled through the money, through professional sports and entertainment.
Right.
So we have the power now. We have the power to shut this system down and bring it to its knees and demand change and demand a piece of the pie. Period.
Exactly. And we need to make sure that we take full advantage and opportunity of the power that we have. And I'm talking about these sports athletes, these entertainers, all these folks that are essentially, they call themselves black, or they are a person of African ancestry, and you have all this influence. You might as well use that. And come on, the NBA is over 80% of black folks. Over 80%. Yeah. And the NFL is over 70%.
Right.
We have so much power and influence within those spaces, because we're essentially the money, we're the talent, we're everything in it.
And we know this is the case, folks, because Goodell and all these corporations, they're mentioning you. They're mentioning white supremacy. They mentioning racist things. They have never done that. So don't let them pacify you with this with a couple of dollars and a few words. Make them accountable. I couldn't be on the team because I'm gonna ride this wave to the end.
Seriously,
you know what I mean? Because, and if I'm a leader on the team, I'm gonna let everybody else. Ain't nobody playing, bruh. You getting that $250,000? I pay your salary for the year. I got 30-40 million over here. I'm gonna pay your salary if you worry about not paying your bills. But we not playing nothing. Just need one team to do that. Then they out of rotation and mess up the whole pie. No one can eat. It's about this paper too. When it comes to Europeans, you just gotta follow the money. NBA, NFL is fuel. It's a $1 billion industry. Every team owner is a billionaire. That shows you how much money is involved. So if you don't play that game, you mess with their bottom line. They have no choice but to adhere to your demands. Period.
Don't become a rich slave. We have to go to a break, brothers and sisters, and we'll be right back.
Yes, sir.
Kundalini Rising Intuitive Advisement offers a unique all-in-one service of soul coaching, divination, and genuine counseling. We provide guidance for difficult transitional times and effective problem-solving solutions that will meet your soul as well as your practical needs. To book an appointment, please call us at 585-371-8445 or visit our booking site at www.kundalinirising.simplybook.me.
Welcome back to the Morning of Truth.
Yes, my brother.
We have some things to talk about, bro. Like in terms of this purge we're insinuating that needs to happen. And part of that, a big part of it, actually probably the foundational aspect of it, is breaking these psychological chains of enslavement. There's some terminologies that me and you've been introduced to throughout our journeys of scholarship, and one of them is memetic infection. You got some information that you actually looked up yourself, and I'm gonna let you elaborate on that first before I actually go into information that I received from a very powerful mentor / scholar that I never met before, but I have a lot of his information. I have a lot of his books, Dr. Wade Noble's book. Go ahead, my brother.
Well, essentially, I wanted to know, okay, where's this word meme come from? Where's this whole thing of memetic infection? And doing a little bit of digging, there's a book that was published in 1976 called The Selfish Gene. And that author, who was a biologist, kind of into Darwinism, his name was Richard Dawkins. And he kind of coined the term. They're giving him credit to do that. And you know, when Europeans coin a term, whenever you write a book or do research, you always have other people that you research. So we have to dig deep. But they trying to say it came from, it's an ancient Greek term, you know what I mean? Which means to imitate or to pretend. So, but basically what's happening here is he do his research, he found out that individuals who act a certain way end up influencing or infecting other people to do the same thing. And you can jump, you're gene jumping. And then all of a sudden you are infecting people. It's an infection that spreads across a mass amount of people. and have them all thinking the same way. And which I'm is going to go into a second, when it comes to Africans, the way that we act, the way that we see ourselves are not of ourselves. They're from other cultures, and particularly European cultures. And so we're walking around regurgitating and carrying thoughts that don't support who we truly are.
Exactly.
So the whole idea of a meme, we have these on our phones, using imagery as a form to communicate a feeling or a thought or a concept. These things can be transferred to other areas, not just on your phone, but when it comes to like the statues that we have in our brains.
Those
embedded.
are memes.
Yes, they are memes. And so we have to be really careful of what we ingest and don't let some kind of gene that's foreign invade our system.
Yes.
We got to have some kind of fight back, some kind of...
We need an immune... We need cultural T cells.
Right.
That's what we need.
Right, to fight off these dangerous, malignant genes that's embedding racist rhetoric that we end up embedding and regurgitating.
Right. Or in other words, injected oppression, injected racism, or whatever else you want to call it. Right? So my brother have just basically... laid down the seminal work that came out of this word meme, and I'm gonna elaborate more into it. This passage I'm going to read to you guys, it comes from the Island of Memes, Haiti's Unfinished Revolution. The author name is Dr. Wade Nobles, and when I read this book, it was very eye-opening to a lot of things that I'm not going to get into, but in particular, it definitely highlighted how memes are materialized, how it needs a host for it to proliferate and build from one generation to the next. So check it out. Critical to understanding the class of culture and consciousness is the idea of memes and memetic ideation and their role in Europe's psychological domination of Africa's mind. The clash is centered on the meaning of being human and the question of human relations, both of which can be illuminated by the utilization of memetic analysis. In The Evolution of Evolutionability, Richard Dawkins defined memes as a unit of cultural inheritance that is naturally selected by virtue of its phenotypic consequence on the particular culture's survival and replication in the cultural environment. The meme itself is defined as a unit of information residing in the brain. Its phenotypic effects are the external consequences of the memetic information. Words, skills, behaviors, etc., he suggests, are the outward and visible manifestations of the memes within the brain, which are transmitted between individuals via the sense organs. Memes use the possessor's communication and imitation skills in order to replicate themselves, and by influencing the world in which their possessor dwells, increase their chances of survival. It can, however, be argued that memes are more than just units of information residing in the brain. And furthering Dawkins' ideas, memes could also be thought of as contagious symbiotic reproductive sensoria information structures and patterns, including all of the senses that influence human knowing and awareness. In doing so, the sensoria information structures / patterns can alter behavior and propagate patterns of behavior to be consistent with sensoria information structures and patterns. Expanding on the idea of memes, sensoria information structure and patterns in the forms of symbols, sounds, touch, and or movement are capable of being perceived by any of the senses and alter behavior in a way that is consistent with and propagates the sensoria. So I'm not going to go too much into the passage, because there's a lot more in here that I can elaborate on. However, what I'm reading, you can essentially see in everyday behavior. We can look at a symbol of the Holy Cross and see totally what this book is talking about. We can look at what we see in media constantly.
Right.
Like Nicki Minaj, for instance, calling herself Black Barbie or whatever, with her hair color being a certain way, and then you go in your neighborhood and see someone in your neighborhood trying to replicate exactly what they saw Nicki Minaj doing in the video. Same thing with us and this sickness that we have about Jordans, and how many of us want to wear a pair of Jordans to the point that we will kill each other for a pair of Jordans.
Right.
Jordan itself has become a meme.
Right.
So when you see that Jumpman symbol, people are fighting over that.
We associate it with a Jordan, with power, with being fresh or hip. I'm included in something.
The Nike swoosh.
I'm a part of the system. I'm a part of this logo system that is on clothing.
Yes.
It's on books and posters. And we're carving it in our heads. We're getting tattoos of it. Even rappers are using it. Like NBA YoungBoy, his logo is the NBA with the Jordan holding up a pistol or something. So even in jewelry. So, and then we pass it on to our children. That's important too about these things. Our children see these same memes, and they also keep the tradition going. And that's how you infect the culture.
That's right. And that's how it continues to live on, because all it needs is a host. It's like larvae, like maggots. You know what I'm saying?
The maggot culture.
Seriously, like you see how maggots reproduces, and all they need is a host, right?
Yep.
And as soon as they got that host, like a parasite, that parasite keeps growing and growing and growing to the point that it takes over. And that's essentially what happened with these European memetic infections.
Yep. And then in America, I want to say that in the world, I should say, not just America, they use the media as the conduit for this stuff.
Absolutely.
Without the media, it wouldn't be so pervasive. And now with a cell phone, it's on your hip or in your hand or in your pocket, we're carrying around this stuff wherever we go. Mm-hmm. So it's attached to us. You know what I'm saying? So we have to be able to have some kind of immune system to protect ourselves from that.
Cultural T cells. The things that we're talking about, you can clearly see in spaces like Japan and China with the McDonald's arches or Burger King. So, like, for you to see a McDonald's in Vietnam, or Coca-Cola, when once upon a time Vietnam was at war with people in our country, they hated us, but now they got McDonald's in these spaces, they got Burger Kings in these spaces and stuff like that. That right there should tell you what you're dealing with. You know what I mean? On a global scale, not just here in the United States, in our own homes, in our households and things like that. Even the language that we're speaking right now, English. This is how the memes are carried over like 10 times over.
Right.
You know what I mean? So this is the issue we're dealing with. And speaking of memetic infections, we also have another terminology that we want to introduce to y'all called cultural misorientation. This is from the seminal work of rest in peace to the ancestor, Dr. Colby Combone.
Respect. Rest in power, my brother.
Yeah, rest in power to the brother. We actually was gonna bring him here. And this is a whole model. Like he has, so when you look at cultural misorientation, first you have to understand what's ASC and ASEO means. ASC is African self-consciousness, and ASEO is African self-extension orientation. So African self-extension orientation, or ACO, is biologically defined. Like you are born inherently with this type of with the African self-extension orientation, and it's manifested in behaviors that's just innately in you. Like an example of that is something that, like braiding, for instance. You got a lot of folks here in the United States that know how to braid just as well as people in Africa, and their hair patterns look exactly the same and so on and so forth, even though they never met each other in the mother continent or folks here in the diaspora. But you see the same behaviors here that you would see on the continent of Africa due to the African self-extension orientation. African self-consciousness is connected to African self-extension orientation. It is biologically defined, but the difference is that it's also environmentally influenced. So when you have an African self-consciousness, and if you're not high in that, then you can easily be subjected to being injected with cultural misorientation. Now, all of us that's in the diaspora are essentially hit by cultural misorientation because of where we are.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? So cultural misorientation, I'm gonna read the definition out of the book. Cultural misorientation refers to a Eurocentric cultural imposed psychopathological condition in Africans involving an internalized Eurocentric consciousness which masquerades as functional normalcy within the framework of the alien Eurocentric American societal system, worldview, or cultural identity. Simply stated, the Eurocentric institutional arrangement of American society socializes, indoctrinates, supports, and reinforces cultural misorientation in African people. So that's out of the book Cultural Misorientation by Dr. Kobe Kambone. And we can see that in so many forms. Like we could look at substance abuse, for instance, right? And how we try to, or drug abuse, and how we use preferential drugs to de-stress ourselves or to release tension because we're trying to run away from the pain that we're enduring from the oppression that we're constantly under. You can also see it in the anti-African media that we just was mentioning, right. Like the TV programs, the music videos, and all the things that we do that are anti-us, right? You also see it in how the beauty standards of women and how they'll go get these weaves, these hair weaves. We could trace this back to Madam C.J. Walker and with the perm and all that, and how we had to use this perm to straighten our hair and try to make our hair look more like white people hair. We try to say, oh, it's to manage a no. You was trying to look like Europeans.
Because they felt that it wasn't their standard of beauty.
Exactly.
They thought it was ugly and coarse and wasn't like theirs. You are other. Mm-hmm. And that's what our sister, Dr. Remember Ani, talks about in Yorugu. We have to objectify and have an other that's other than me. So we internalize that to look at ourselves like, wow, I'm not beautiful.
Right.
So you want to perm your hair. You want to walk a certain way or talk a certain way or live in a certain place to assimilate to be anything other than African.
Right.
And that's the danger in it.
Contact lenses. You want to change the color of your eyes because we think that hazel eyes or blue eyes or green eyes are more prettier than brown eyes, or light skin versus dark skin. The paper bag test. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
all this stuff. You know what I'm saying?
And even on the continent of Africa, especially in Ghana, you're seeing folks bleaching their skin.
Right.
There's a video of a white man that looks like Jesus, and the whole town is going bonkers over this thing. And I don't know how or why. I know why, but you have Africans on the continent who have somewhat abandoning their ancient cultural, spiritual traditions to become a Christian, wearing a cross and having a white Jesus in their house.
Right.
That's the danger of it, because now we're using our whole belief system, our whole spiritual development is not even coming from the context of you, your true self, your African identity.
Exactly. Now, when we look at cultural misorientation and European memetic infection, we have to use the opportunity to introduce folks to the seminal work that happened prior to those that came, like Dr. Bobby Wright, I'm mentioning, in his work on Mentacide. When you look at these terms, look up Mentacide too, because that came like late 70s, early 80s, and this ancestor, Dr. Bobby Wright, he essentially coined the term Mentacide, and essentially it's like mental genocide, which is the brainwashing of who we are as people and the reinforcement of European standards. You know what I'm saying? So we have to be able to connect the dots and also pay homage to those who came before us and put down the work, who trailblazed us and allowed us to be able to bring the scholarship that we're bringing forth to you guys right now.
Yeah, I'm reading something too from our brother who just passed away. I found out, Dr. Conrad Worrell, who was a real crusade when it comes to reparations, but he mentions the book by brother Dr. Bobby Wright, and he talks about it being the major threat to the black race.
Yes.
Mentacide. Like the number one weapon that's going to destroy us all is the ultimate threat to the black race. This thing they call Mentacide.
Mentacide. And we also can't forget Frantz Fanon and his work he's done as well. Frantz Fanon, and when he wrote the book
Wretched of the Earth.
The Wretched of the Earth, and Black Skin, White Mass.
Yes.
You know, those books are very seminal. And also Black Rage. There's a lot of information that came out in the 60s on Richard Wright. He wrote a lot of powerful books. Even James Baldwin. Like, there's so many folks that put work out there on this issue of race and the importance of liberating us through that. You know, so these are the things we gotta purge, brother.
Yeah, we have to. We have to realize that one of the major things that's stopping us to be free is the mind.
Yes.
It is the mind, because that's what's keeping us in this vicious cycle of making a back door for ourselves, putting ourselves into a box and staying in a place which is always seen to be underneath everybody else.
Right.
We can't even see ourselves to be on top. We automatically say, okay, well, I'm just gonna let them. Well, they said I couldn't get this, so I'm just gonna go and do what I've been doing. No, we have to break the psychological, mental chains of white malignancy.
Exactly.
We have to break free, purge, and elevate, evolve.
Right. And the way we do that is by reaching back in our roots. And before we go into this song of the week, I have to do an honorable mention. Dr. Joy DeGroo's work, Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome. Please look up her work, brothers and sisters out there who are not familiar with it. But she touched on a lot of this stuff as well in her form, and she are using clinical terminology to explain how we are traumatized from enslavement and have yet to heal from it.
Right.
That's part of the purging that we're talking about.
Yes.
And she created methods that we could use to purge this out of us. I have my own methods too I'm looking at as well when it comes to body work, somatic cultural therapy, and also looking at the vagus nerve and things like that. But yeah, we got to go on a break, my brother. We have a song coming up.
Yes.
By our brother King James. Shout out to King James.
King James.
He calls himself Serious Times. And he came out with a new project. And it's called Substance Abuse 2. On this track, on this album actually, it's on iTunes. You can he got like 9 tracks on there. Please feel free to look them up on iTunes. Again, it's called Serious Times, Substance Abuse 2. This track right here is called Pain Medication. Thought it was very appropriate in some of the stuff that we're talking about. We were talking about self-medicating and substance abuse and preferential drugs to release stress and tension.
Right.
Yeah, this is called Pain Medication. Shout out to my brother again, King James. We're going to get to it. We'll be right back.
I do that pain shit well, man.
Me yelling that leave me the hell alone.
I don't know if that's a good or bad thing.
It's stressing me out.
Shit, I ain't had a dry pillow since 2016, nigga. Shit real. Substance. You drop pain but don't provide the prescription for it. I sacrifice and build bridges for you to get across it. Before the alkaline water, we had to sip from faucets. Live long enough, be lucky to get some wisdom for it. Yeah, come eat with me, I prepare the table. Cause I can do a lot more for you than that shit I gave you. Don't judge my loyalty by a like on the page. My life was a maze. Couldn't tell you my nights from my days, but prices was paid. Close friends sending kites from the cage, them pipes to get raised. Cold still with ice in my veins. An introvert that get in the dirt. Go figure. They say I'm industry ready, but I don't know, nigga. Don't get me wrong, success is part of the goal, nigga. But I decline if the price is selling my soul, nigga. So, nigga, get your money. Fuck is you playing, boy? Androids, I don't expect you to get the whole picture. You blind yourself for a second, that mean you stop looking. You burned yourself on that stove, that mean you stop cooking. Propositions turned down, stages that I done burnt down. Speculation and criticisms about my earned crown. Women try shooting they shot, they say that I'm fine. And no disrespect, just don't got the space in my mind. They like, when you getting hitched, you taking your time. I'm on my grind, hun. If you can't relate, then that's fine. You get excited when they spin your record. My niggas hype when they send a letter. He doing 10 or better. And just when I thought that this shit was over with, one of my homies lost his mother to this COVID shit. I swear my spirit is very hard in the Cobra grip. But God, I noticed the pain that you train your soldiers with. I mean, I get it, I know that we all on borrowed time. But bring my grandmother back, she can borrow mine. I ain't fine. Said, son, lately it seems that what's consuming you is death. I'm like, it's true what you expect when that shit show up at your steps. Cuz died from friendly fire. Now I gotta wear his face on my attire. And we gotta share that story with Jamila. We all want a comfort meal, especially when you knowing how that hunger feels. A hopeless romantic just trying to find something real. I tried to emulate Bishop, but little Uncle Phil and Bill Cosby. God, please watch me. Reoccurring dreams, you blowing breath back into my body, knee deep in my autopsy. I'm not at all cocky, just trusting my ability. Manufactured rappers, they lack the proper assembly. Just here to motivate. Young kings, marry a queen and procreate. And shorty don't tolerate if he can't afford you more. Your body should be a temple and not a corner store. Really, I just want Jai and Tanaj to keep their heads to the skies. Utilize every talent, never believe the lies. Speaking into existence, look them dead in their eyes. Mama, you're a queen, Delamar, that's my guy. Now rise.
Yes, indeed.
Yes.
That was my brother, King James, Serious Times. And yeah, he was spitting some pain on that track, man.
Yeah, I like my man Flo.
Yeah.
Real polished. You know what I'm saying? I'm not sure how long he been doing it, but it sounds like he's a veteran. And I appreciate it, my brother. And we need more music like that from the 585. All that auto tuning the young boys be doing.
Right.
A couple of young cats was doing some things, but it's good to hear that from the 585. So shout out to my man King James.
Yes, indeed. He's dope, man. As a matter of fact, he's very instrumental in keeping the name Moran alive. He actually is a very close friend of Moran. Rest in power to the brother that was found dead on Mother's Day, actually, a couple years ago. And they have memorials for him every single year since his death. I covered it, and I shot a film called The Avenue with a high school senior.
Oh yeah, I remember that. That was a dope video too, by the way, my brother.
Thank you, my brother.
Yes.
Yes, indeed. It was a short documentary film that I did with a high school senior from the School Without Walls. And I mentored her in that process and showed her some stuff. And I also covered this particular issue with Moran and my brother King James. He's in the video actually, and he's shouting out his fans, his folks, and he actually sampled some of that stuff out of that video and plugged it into his music. So I appreciate that. So yeah, shout out to my brother. If you're listening, man. Of course, you see I support you, man. Keep bringing that thunder, and we're going to take it there.
Word
We
up.
got like 13 more minutes for the show ends, my brother.
Hey,
so
man,
let's get to it.
Let's go.
Yeah, so
Current state of affairs, my brother.
yeah.
We got we had this is officers in North Carolina that recording a 45-minute recording of them in 2 different cars just going in about the whole protests, about black people and how they we're bending over for them and we're doing all this for them, and you know what, if there's a race war, I'm ready. You know what I'm saying the N-word all through the recordings, and I believe they were fired.
They were fired.
And you know, and they have a black police chief. What a tough spot to be in, because at these days and time, it just shows you how entrenched these race soldiers, as Tariq would call them, are embedded in the culture.
Right.
And they in law enforcement, they're judges, they're all over this country.
Right.
And it's not going to whisk these people away overnight. We have to be diligent. We have to call these people out. We have to make them accountable and use all of our power to not just fire these people. People should be arrested and outcasted from society.
Exactly.
Because they're a danger.
And I think that there are going to be more charges. That they're saying there's going to be more charges. For those that are not aware of what we're talking about, this is something that happened in Wilmington, North Carolina. And these racist police officers, they were expressing their disgust in what's been occurring. And they try to cover it up because this was actual recording that they were not aware of. Their body cam was recording their conversation. They thought it was off because they have a feature where they could turn the body cam off, and they thought they were speaking offline, but they wasn't. And there was somebody that was in the Wilmington police force that go through the tapes, the recordings or whatever, and they stumbled across this one, listened to it, and decided to turn it over to the investigation team there. And when the chief of police heard this, he felt that he had the duty to release the tapes. They haven't been released yet, but they're talking about releasing them so the public can hear it. And the public need to know about these police officers, so he released their names. He also released documentation of their firing or their termination letters. Released that as well, and a whole bunch of other stuff that he did. And they did a whole long press conference on this as well. So I do appreciate the diligence, the swift action that they took once they found out about these tapes. However, I want to see some charges because they were talking about committing hate crimes. They're committing terrorist acts on black people. Race war, exactly.
So you're trying to say a race war. You're trying to take out a mass of people.
Right.
And they're saying they were prepared.
Yes.
Like, we ready.
They got the assault rifles and everything ready to just spray people down.
And you have African people who pay taxes in Wilmington.
Yes.
So you're using taxpayer money to take out the people.
Right.
Or have you lost your mind? Like, what weapons what technology are you gonna use to do this race war? Government money? The city of Wilmington's money?
And Wilmington has a racist history too. If you was to really study that, they got like lynching history there. Like, they have a lot of stuff that occurred there, and this is very well connected to the DNA of that space, because this type of behavior is not new to that city.
Not at all. And not to mention, just like Tulsa, Wilmington had a thriving economic black community there as well.
Right.
That, as you know, all of our communities from Rosewood to Tulsa to even out on the West Coast, we had communities where black folks were being very self-sufficient, independent, business owners, landowners. And somehow these places don't exist today because of white malignancy. Right.
And let's rewind a little bit. I want to take it back to the first segment because I forgot to mention this. What he's talking about, what Shabaka's talking about, is tied to these statues. So let's look at the historical aspect on when these statues were being built. They were being built during the time of Reconstruction. During the time of Reconstruction, there were a lot of black businesses that were built in cities and communities that were thriving. There were banks, black banks that was popping up everywhere and all of that.
Right.
A lot of black banks, right? A lot of I think 135 banks Black banks popped up during that time frame of Reconstruction. And then simultaneously, you had KKK riling up and the building of these Confederate statues. That wasn't for Southern pride and trying to promote all this, like, oh, this is some greatness right here. No, y'all wasn't trying to preserve no culture. That was a response to black folks thriving in this country.
Right.
And the same thing comes with the other wave of the Confederacy, because you have a few waves of that. From the late 1800s to the early 1900s, preferably around 1921, 22. You know what happened in 1921 with the Tulsa bombings and all that stuff. These statues were being built simultaneously while this was happening.
Right.
Same time happening during from 1940s, 1950s up through to nearly 1970. You had another wave of Confederate statues being built. What was happening during that time frame? Brown versus Board of Education, Civil Rights Act, and all that other stuff. All this movement that was happening with the Black Panther Party, all of that was happening. At the same time, these Confederate statues were being built in waves. So do not say that's about Southern pride. That is a response to black folks trying to enhance themselves and improve their living conditions in an already segregated place where you're discriminating, marginalizing, disenfranchising, and keeping folks from being able to rise above, trying to keep your proverbial knee on their necks.
Right. And you put those statues in the center of these towns. You put them in strategic places to remind people of your legacy of domination over black people.
Right.
You know what I mean? And you have used that to always remind us. They got the one in front of New York City, in front of one of the museums. They got, I can't think of the guy's name, but he got an African. He have an African on this side and a Native American on this side, up next to a horse in this position right in front of the building. That's intimidating.
Yeah, it is.
It's also showing. So it definitely was a reminder to put us in our place.
Right. Just like the building of the Mount Rushmore. A Klansman built that. So you wanna really come on.
And look at Stone Mountain in Atlanta.
Yeah.
Confederate Park with faces engraved in stone on a stone mountain.
Right. Come on, man. Like, we know exactly what you guys are about. And now you're trying to preserve this culture. No. Them statues need to come down. These racist folks like Kevin Piner and Brian Gilmore, they are the children. They are the substance. They are the residuals of what we're talking about when it comes to these Confederate statues, these racist presidents. You are not my forefathers. Stop calling George Washington and Thomas Jefferson my forefather. You're not.
You're not. We rebuke you.
Seriously. Come on, and black folks, stop calling George Washington and Thomas Jefferson your forefather. They were your foredeceptor.
Your former slave master.
Exactly, your foreoppressor. That's what they were. Anyways, moving out along, we have these record-breaking numbers popping up for COVID-19 cases in Florida. You also have them going on in Arizona and Texas, California, and these folks, a lot of these folks, white conservatives, we're pushing the issue of we don't need masks here. We don't have to follow or abide by these rules and so on and so forth.
We don't have an issue here. It's not a problem, not an issue. Now look. And then
right.
you were banning folks from New York coming to Florida and coming in certain states. Now you're getting banned. Now Cuomo's saying, hey, now y'all can't come to New York.
Tables unturned.
You gotta get we need 15 days for you to come to New York State.
Right. We are not gonna have a repeat of what occurred in New York before because y'all dumbasses decided not to abide by the CDC or whatever they were trying to put out there about these masks and stuff. And don't get me wrong, like I ain't gonna lie, I'm conflicted in a sense about this. On one hand, I do understand and appreciate the public health response because this is a public health crisis. Right. We can't ignore that. We recognize that people are dying. We also have to recognize the percentage of people that are dying in accordance to, as opposed to those who are recovering from it.
Right.
Right. It's like the mortality rate for COVID right now is like between 1% and less than 1%. It's very low, right? However, folks are getting sick. The vast majority of those who are getting diagnosed with COVID-19 are between the age of 20 and 30 years old now.
Right.
And the majority of them are asymptomatic. So the testing, as testing increases, of course the numbers are going to increase as well.
And that's something the president was fighting against. Well,
right.
Because of the testing numbers are high. It doesn't
matter.
That means that people have it. Whether, I'm willing to bet if you were to test, I would think more than 50% of America probably has asymptomatic COVID-19.
Oh, as a matter of fact, it is projected for 80% of the United States to be infected by COVID-19 by the end of it. And it's probably that already. You're probably at that number to begin with. Me and you probably was exposed to it sometime, sometime or not. We haven't been tested of it, but as you can see, me and you are very healthy. We have healthy immune systems. We live a certain type of way, and we keep ourselves mucus free damn near.
Yeah, and so, but for those who don't, then those that suffer from it. But we don't know when this thing is going to slow down, because I'm sure those Republican governors, what type of phase plan are you going to roll out this? If you're going to close things down, what is that going to look like?
Right.
Like some places saying that they shouldn't wear masks. Mm-hmm. Like, and they saying that masks can really, really deter the thing from spreading. So we'll see what's going to happen with that.
Right. And if you're going to be traveling, because it is the summertime now, if you're going to be traveling, be careful. Sanitize yourself, protect yourself, keep yourself out of harm's way if you can. Don't go into any crowded places where there's a whole bunch of people around and you don't know what the hell they have.
Right.
Because you might walk up out of there with COVID all up in you.
Yeah. The covert syndrome.
Right. Cracker's obsession with viral infectious destruction.
The COVID war.
COVID war.
There's a war going on with COVID.
Right. As you can see, my brother, me and you've been doing really well in assuring that we're not stepping out into these spaces. Like when people was protesting and going out there and yelling Black Lives Matter. Initially, we thought about going out there and doing something. Then we thought about, let's sit still. COVID is still out there.
Right.
We may end up catching some viral infections.
Yeah, we need to keep our immune system strong and our brain strong. We got work to do. Right. We have work to do.
And plus we have other ways of fighting these type of illnesses. And I'm talking about the illness of racism. That's probably the most pervasive cancer, social cancer, mankind or man has ever endured. One man, whatever, how you want to put it.
Right.
So
we getting close, my brother.
As a matter of fact, it is actually an hour, my brother. We did good. So let's tell me, man, what are your thoughts on what we talked about, man?
Well, I'm gonna keep it short. I think that first of all, there's a purge happening, and we're in preparation for that right now. So for all the listeners, we want to be prepared for this. We got to get our mental in place to look at and reevaluate everything when it comes to how we move and how we think. We want to try to go back and reevaluate and say, hey, is this what Africans would do? Let's do something different. How can we empower our people when it comes to education, economics, buying black? Another thing we need to do is have weapons, and our weapons will be creating our own memes, using our own ancestors, our own principles, our own thoughts to combat what we're fighting against. And when it comes to COVID, eating healthy, eating food that's electric, that's alive, to prepare your immune system to fight not only white malignancy, but also foreign memetic infections, diseases, parasites. And I think that once we get our mental and our physical in place, we're able to fight and win the war.
Well said, my brother. Well put. And I veggie back on everything that you say. I want to really highlight the importance of us not saying the names of these oppressive people when we are referring to spaces that we live in. We need to not say Rochester any longer. There has to be another name that we can call the space that we live in right now. I'm tired of referring to this city as Rochester, knowing damn well Nathaniel Rochester was a wicked motherfucker.
Right.
Period. I am tired of driving down Jefferson Avenue, knowing damn well that Thomas Jefferson was a wicked motherfucker. Knowing damn well that Thomas Jefferson was so sick, but we have a high school named after him. We have a high school named after Thomas Edison and all these other folks. Benjamin Franklin. We have to find a way to erase and eradicate this out of our psyche, because they did a damn good job to make sure that they were enshrined in our heads and they will live on. And it will be too hard for us to purge this out of us, because this is from the time we were born. Our whole entire life, we know these names. This is all we know when we drive down the street. Oh, I'm about to turn down Jefferson Avenue, and then I'm about to,
go over here on George Washington Street.
They did a damn good job at enshrining their ancestors and made sure that we know who their ancestors were. Mm-hmm. We need to do the same thing.
We need to.
It's the right thing. They knew what to do. They knew how to keep their legacy alive. Now we have to do the same thing. South Africa has done it. When South African apartheid ended, they renamed their airports. They started renaming their streets and everything. They started purging all of that out.
Right.
And a lot of the spots right now in South Africa is named after African revolutionaries and people that they revere very much so.
So we need to do the same.
We need to do the same thing. That's part of the purge. And we have to push all this cracker out of our heads. All the stuff that we learned, we need to relearn. We need to redefine. We need to deconstruct, reconstruct, then construct from the ground up. Period.
Yo, that's what I'm talking about. Listen, be sure to listen to The Morning Truth every Monday. And we're in the verge of being available on iTunes, we on YouTube, we gotta be on Spotify, all of your popular outlets for podcasts. Be sure to tell others to share and also comment on our podcast. You know what I'm saying? And you can visit us always at themorningtruth.com. You can also mention The Morning Truth on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And we'll see you next episode.
That's right. On that note, we are out. One.
Peace.
The principles of justice, harmony, balance, order, and reciprocity. It is our duty to deliver authentic and unapologetic messages to the world, from politics to economics, education, spiritual roots. This is the Morning of Truth.